Hi, welcome to the Ellis Talker Show. I'm DV LeBron. You know, my guest here has been part of fighting crime for the better part of his life, and a better part of it was spent in the DEA, and that's why I'm having him on to talk about fentanyl, the cartels, and everything, and how the whole drug game is going and how it's changed in this time. His name is Brian Townsend. How you doing, sir?
Hey, I'm good. Thanks for having me here.
Thank you so much for coming on. You know, I wanted to have you on because I like when I spoke with the congressman, when I've had him on, and I've had different politicians on, they've talked about fentanyl and how it's affecting. And if you watch the news, if you breathe, you could see that there's like, I forget how many thousands of people overdosing on fentanyl every day. So it's a real crisis. It's a real problem that's hitting our streets. Kind of reminiscent. I'm old enough to remember when crack started hitting our streets. I was young, but I was there. So, but first, before we get into all that, I wanted to go ahead and have you introduce yourself and tell me a little bit about you.
Yeah. Brian Townsend's my name. Spent 28 years in law enforcement. I was a police officer in Joplin, Missouri for about 5 years. And then I did my dream job. I went to my dream job, which was the DEA, the Drug Enforcement Administration. And I was a special agent for the DEA for the last 23 years of my career. And in 2020, I had an opportunity to return to Missouri and be the resident agent in charge, which means I was in charge of DEA operations in Southwest Missouri and the 25 counties we covered. And it was a great assignment, great people, great work. But after a few years, I just made a decision that I was young and ready for another chapter in my life, and I retired.
Brian, how does one stumble into DEA? I mean, like, of all things, you just say, you know what, let me just go ahead and go to DEA. How did you get there? What brought you to that?
I had an interest in law enforcement when I was in high school, but quite frankly, I didn't know the path. The internet wasn't, like it is now. And the information wasn't, as accessible as it is now. But I had an interest in law enforcement and decided to just go to college and study criminal justice, criminology, and still wasn't sure how this was going to happen. And someone suggested the police officer route, and I did a ride along with a local agency, and that night I was hooked. I'm like,
yes,
this is awesome, And so I did the job for about 5 years, and about 4 years in, I made the decision that I had enough time and experience to try for DEA, and contacted a recruiter and went through the hiring process. And about a little less than a year later, I was sitting in Quantico, Virginia at our academy, and the chapter started.
That's pretty darn awesome. Now, what are you doing nowadays?
So I retired a couple years ago, and I'm actually busier, if you can believe that. I started my own business, Eagle 6 Training, and we do speaking, consulting, and training. Yep, thank you for that. So I'm busy with that, and then I went to work for a risk center called MOCIC, the Mid-States Organized Crime Information Center. Their headquarters is in Springfield, Missouri, and I work for them as a law enforcement training coordinator. So I conduct training in the 9 states that we cover. And then on my own, I conduct training on the other 41 states. And then I also just recently started a nonprofit organization called Only 2MG. And we are dedicated to raising awareness of illicit drugs, specifically fentanyl. Because as you said earlier, it's definitely the drug that's changed everything.
So let's get into that. When you became a DEA agent and they're putting you on your first assignments, what was the drug out there? What were they having you chase?
Methamphetamine, which is still the most seized drug in the United States. But my first assignment out of DEA was Little Rock, Arkansas. And I remember when I got my badge at Quantico on graduation, the administrator, when he shook my hand, he could see that I was going to Little Rock, and he leaned in and he whispered, he goes, "You'll be working a lot of meth labs." And he was right. I definitely worked a lot of meth labs and a lot of methamphetamine traffickers early on. And that was absolutely the drug that we were working quite a bit, early on in my career. I mean, we did a lot of cocaine cases as well, and some heroin and even marijuana, but methamphetamine was definitely king in the state.
How has the game changed as far as drugs from when you not just the potency, and we'll talk about that, but just in general, the whole business? How has that changed since when you started till now? How have you seen that move around?
Yeah, I think the big thing is the cartels, the transnational criminal organizations that really took over. I mean, look at methamphetamine, for instance. When we were working meth labs, my goodness, I mean, there were multiple meth labs every single week, and we were just inundated with them. So a lot of the governments, they were trying to regulate the chemicals and things like that. So, to this day, like if you need ephedrine, the good Sudafed, what do you have to do? You have to, talk to the pharmacist and sign the little thing that says you won't make meth labs, and they give you the good stuff, right? Well, yeah, and we did that so we could regulate the chemicals, but the cartels, they were like, hey, that's great, we can buy this in bulk from places like China and India, and that's exactly what they did, and that's when they took over the meth trade. They started to bulk import these chemicals from places like China. And that's when we saw the super labs pop up, and they took over the meth business. And I remember early on, or actually I was down on the border from 2009 to 2016. I was in Corpus, and we worked along the border, and we were still paying about $21,000 a pound for meth. And right now it's $2,000, $2,500 a pound. I mean, they've just took over the business, controlled the market, saturated the market. And so I think that's one of the big things. And so when fentanyl came around, it was a perfect storm for them. They were like, yeah, we've already written the playbook on this, and right. I think that's the biggest thing, is just they've really eliminated a lot of their competition, and have really scaled, the trafficking.
They knocked down the middleman. Now,
100%.
How did you, and you know what, to talk more about that, I recently sat down on a panel with a congressional panel, a community board, and there was a sheriff there from one of the nearing counties to hear, and one of the prosecutors, or the DA, excuse me, and they were talking about how they don't find meth labs anymore. Those things, I mean, you're not finding those things anymore. It's just because it's just too cheap. It's coming over so much, it's too cheap. But
yep.
How is it different now from, and I don't know what our age bracket's got to be around the same, since you retired before me, but how is it different now than, like, let's say from Pablo Escobar or Griselda bringing in stuff from Colombia? How is that different from the cartels and how they're doing it?
I think the violence has certainly increased. The level of corruption has increased. They know how to infiltrate different systems, whether it's law enforcement, whether it's politics. And, when you're dealing with, especially Mexico, I mean, let's face it, the level of corruption and level of problems they have down there are incredible. And that's certainly something that we have to, mitigate, or at least acknowledge when we're working investigations that take us south of the border. I think that's the biggest. I mean, they've always had that control and that corruption, and and the ability to do a lot of things because of the money they're making. But now it's just a lot bigger. The scale is.
What was the biggest obstacle that you saw in trying to stop this flow of drugs, especially now fentanyl? What is well, I know you can't speak for the DA, but what is law enforcement running into?
Well, it's a game of whack-a-mole on the laws, that's a big thing. And really it's just the volume, the sheer volume. I mean, fentanyl especially, I mean, now it's in pill form, and we see millions and millions and millions of pills, and it's just a fraction of what we're really getting. I mean, these things cost the cartels pennies to make. And you look at the seizure numbers, especially the last couple of years, I think we're up to 115 million pills seized. And, we don't even know what percentage of that is, because you look at all the pills that we don't seize, right? And I think that's a big change, is just the sheer volume. They've just been able to dominate the market and really saturate the market and and control pricing, everything. I mean, it's a business to them.
And you've seen how they flooded the market with meth. How is this different than them with this? Well, I know that fentanyl is a different drug, but how is it different in the way they're going about it with this fentanyl? Are they following the same playbook and just throwing it out there, or kind of just have they changed on the way that they're putting that out?
No, they haven't. And they can increase production. They can produce this stuff. Like I said, it's pennies to make pills. So, and they've already developed the playbook. You know, they're very good at smuggling drugs into this country. And now they have another drug that is very, very inexpensive for them to produce. And they know that the profit margins are incredible once they get to the US. And so now, you know, with the established routes and all the logistics and everything they have to get drugs into the US, now they have another drug they can put in that mix. And they're making a lot of money on the fentanyl traffic. I mean, it's, you know, we still seize a lot of methamphetamine, we still seize a lot of cocaine, but the fentanyl is.
Do you think that getting, and I know that Mexico is sort of like a narco state, and you're not going to be able to make them do anything, you know, unless you're costing them more money. But that said, like, does banning those chemicals from coming in to this hemisphere, does that help? Does that change the game?
Yeah, I think there's some more we can do with that. I mean, the problem is you have a lot of bad actors and a lot of, even, you know, they don't care what the law is, right? I mean, there's restrictions even in China on the fentanyl precursor chemicals, but they're going to find ways to get those to the cartels and to the people that are wanting to make this, you know, this dangerous drug. You know, I'd love for us to go after the chemical companies more. And I know DEA has been, in the federal government and law enforcement in general, has been pretty aggressive on that, and a lot of good cases on that. I mean, that's certainly something that we should be doing more of, is targeting these organizations that are, you know, that are selling chemicals. I mean, you realize you can go on Facebook or Instagram and buy these directly from the sources in China.
I didn't know that.
It's very bold how they advertise. You know, they obviously, the folks with the bigger, deeper pockets are the cartels and the, you know, the Sinaloa and the CJNG in particular, and, you know, and they're buying this stuff in just metric tons, you know, shipping it over to Mexico, and like I said, they've taken over the lab business like they did with methamphetamine. But yeah, these chemical companies are pretty bold. They advertise online, and we definitely need to do more and shut those folks down.
I know those cartels can be absolutely terrifying. They're ruthless in the way that they do things. When you were down there in working down on the southern end, and you were dealing with that more closely, what was your impression about what they're doing and how they're doing it, as far as drugs, bringing it here, and the violence that they're doing to bring it?
You know, they have no rules. They have no morals. They have no values. It's all about money. And you know, we have those restrictions, which is a good thing. You know, I can sleep at night knowing that, you know, I follow the law and have ethics and have integrity, and they don't. And that's a big challenge when you're, you know, when you're trying to go after these organizations. They're ruthless. They're violent. You know, they're very good at what they do. I think we downplay a lot of this. This is a business to them, and this is a big moneymaker. And
did you see it on our side of the border?
Yes. Yeah, that gets downplayed quite a bit. I mean, most of the violence is obviously on the south side. It's usually for territory, but 100% saw it on this side of the border. Because what people don't realize is the drugs just don't come to the border and get thrown over and hope everything happens. I mean, they have to set up operations on the U.S. side as well. So, you know, DEA releases information where you can look at the cartel control within the U.S. and, you know, especially in the major cities. In the Sinaloa and the CJNG, I mean, they're really fighting for control of the U.S. market as well. And I mean, they'll work with motorcycle clubs and local gangs and other criminal organizations, but they also set up operations themselves on the north side of the border in the U.S. and they're very good. The logistics. I mean, they've been doing this for several decades now, and now they have a drug, like I said, that's cheaper to make. It's more potent. The profit margins are higher, and it's a game changer.
So let's talk fentanyl, because we've been talking about the cartel aspect, the violent aspect. What is fentanyl, and I mean, why is it so deadly?
It's a powerful synthetic opioid. It is deadly because it only takes a little bit. Only 2 milligrams is what we consider a lethal dose. It has to get into your system. It has to get through that mucous membrane, in your bloodstream, but only a little bit. I mean, only 2 milligrams is all it takes. And once it's in your system to kill you, obviously there's some factors there like your tolerance and the potency and things like that. But we've never had a drug this deadly in our drug supply. We have people that are dying from fentanyl first-time drug use, especially our young people. We've never had that before. I mean, it's very rare to hear that, someone died of drugs the first time they used them, if it not, excluding fentanyl. I mean, it's just very, very rare. But now you have a drug that's happening all the time. And like I said, especially the young people where they're experimenting with drugs or they're casually using drugs and they're unwittingly getting illicit fentanyl. We see it in our entire drug supply. We see it in our cocaine. We see it in our, if you can find heroin still, we see it in the heroin. We see it in methamphetamine. The pills, I mean, you might think you're getting a Percocet or an Oxy or Vicodin or Adderall or whatever. And more than likely you're getting some type of garbage substance or illicit fentanyl. And we've never had a drug like that in our drug supply. It is 100% changed the drug landscape of this country.
Wow. And you hear it and you see it on the news every time. And it is a scary thing to see, because I know, I mean, there have been videos with police officers they're doing stops, right? And they're checking stuff out, and and they came across a white substance. Next, the cop is falling over and another cop's running to him. Whoa, whoa, whoa. And they got to get the Narcan out because the fentanyl got to him and he just started deteriorating fast. And that's just scary.
Yeah. And what's interesting about that, I'm glad you brought that up. We have zero collaboration on any of those videos that fentanyl was the cause of that officer or those officers going down. So back in 2016, DEA, and I love DEA, but we put some information out that this stuff, just being around it, could kill you, could cause those officers to overdose. And we now know that that's incorrect. I've seen the videos. I know exactly what you're talking about, but none of those lab reports have come back with fentanyl in the system. Zero.
Oh,
the toxicology reports, cannot collaborate any of that. I still tell officers, hey, look, use common sense. This is a very, very dangerous drug. Wear gloves, wear whatever protection, you that makes you feel safe. I always wear gloves, but then again, I always wear gloves when I was around any drug or even a drug ledger. I don't care if I was searching the kitchen of the house. I always wear gloves. I mean, it's just a precaution that I always took. But when it comes to the quote unquote officer exposure or the videos that we see on YouTube and online, we have not been able to substantiate any of them.
What kind of things are you seeing that law enforcement is running into when dealing with fentanyl?
That fear is a big thing. I think that's what we're really running into. Is there's a lot of officers who are fearful of the fentanyl being absorbed through contact or just being around it. I think that's the biggest thing we're seeing. And one of the things that I do when I do my fentanyl training is I try to correct that. I try to tell people that, hey, I get it. This is a very dangerous substance. It kills a lot of people, but it's got to get into your body to do that. It's got to get through that mucous membrane. So I'm just trying to correct a lot of misinformation and a lot of, myths and and information that's out there, because, I believed it too when I first heard it, and I've seen the videos, and it scared the heck out of me. I was in Quantico back in 2016, and I thought, oh my goodness, I'm gonna go back out into the field and I'm gonna die.
Yeah.
But that's just the case. Yeah.
What's the biggest misconceptions that you see surrounding fentanyl, since this is what you train on?
Yeah. So just being around it, touching it, inhaling it. Those are the two, touching it and inhaling it. Do I recommend inhaling it and touching fentanyl? No, of course not. But I wouldn't recommend inhaling or touching marijuana or methamphetamine or cocaine or any other drug as well. I mean, I tell officers, I tell people in general, first responders, whoever I'm talking to respect, the drug, the scenario, the situation that you're in. Use common sense. If you're not wearing gloves, good nitrile gloves, then shame on you. Those are the two biggest ones, though. Just being around it, the skin absorption and the inhalation. And like I said, I'm not trying to downplay it. I'm happy those officers are okay. But we know now that zero of those toxicology reports have actually contained fentanyl in their system. So just getting that information out there and letting them know that, hey, be careful, be smart, but it's going to take a lot more than just being around it.
Can't believe everything you see on the internet, huh?
That's what Abraham Lincoln said, right?
Yeah, right. So yeah, there's a lot of these kids that are overdosing. In my community, there is becoming a problem with fentanyl. Law enforcement is starting to see more of it. What can parents do to try to mitigate any issues when it comes to fentanyl, or try to educate their children on how to stay away from this stuff?
The big one is talk to your kids, period. There is so much research out there that proves that talking to your kids, it's not going to stop them from using drugs 100%. But when kids are having these when parents are having these conversations with their kids, it significantly decreases the chances of them using drugs. And I've met so many parents that are, out of sight, out of mind. They want to bury their heads in the sand. And they don't realize that if they don't have this conversation with their children, someone else will. A drug trafficker, one of their goofy friends, social media. I mean, somebody's going to have this conversation. And it's interesting because you can look at a lot of surveys. I was looking at one a couple of weeks ago where, they asked parents, hey, are you talking to your kids? And they're like, oh, absolutely. Like 80% of the kids or parents are like, yeah, of course we do. We talk to our kids about drugs. And then they asked the kids of those same parents who responded so positively to the survey. And it was like 25, 30% were like, yeah, that's it. I mean, there's a huge disconnect between parents who are talking to kids, or at least saying they're talking to kids, and that's actually happening. And like I said, the research is so clear. I mean, it significantly reduces the chances of and the longer you can wait to use drugs out of adolescence, the more likely you are to not form some type of substance use disorder, some type of quote unquote addiction to a drug. I mean, every single study shows that. So we have to talk to children. It's that simple. I mean, and it's age appropriate. If you have a 6-year-old, talk like you talk about any other subject. If you have a 15-year-old, talk to him or her like you would any other subject at that age. But we have to have these conversations. There's a lot of resources out there. DEA has a lot of resources, a ton of nonprofit organizations, Song for Charlie. There's several organizations. Mine, only 2MG. I mean, we're trying to provide information that parents can use, and that's the biggest thing. And I got to tell you, it's frustrating because, early on I thought, man, I'm going to reach a lot of parents, and it is hard to reach parents. It really is. I had a friend of mine, retired DEA agent, said, hey, less than 1% of parents are going to show up, and I was like, whatever. I didn't believe it. And I remember the first time I was asked to come to a school for a parent night. It's embarrassing. I think I had 6 people in the entire room.
Yeah.
To give you another example, I won't tell you the school district, even though they were doing the right thing. They had several speakers. They had one on drugs, which was me, teen pregnancy, nutrition, online predators, you name it, bullying. I mean, they had a plethora of subjects that would help parents and students. And then they thought, we're going to offer 2 classes. We're going to offer one on a weekday, and then we're going to offer one on a weekend. And that way, if you're working or if you got a busy schedule, you'll have some opportunities. So they had all these speakers, and they had 2 different options to attend this. And you know how many folks showed up? 17. 17. You know how many folks showed up to the drug portion? 0. I mean, and that's the reality. This is a big school district. This is the reality of what's happened is we're not having these important conversations, and especially when it comes to fentanyl, I can't overplay this enough. This is a drug that has changed the drug landscape. It really has. This is a drug that is killing people first time drug use.
So tell me, and that's what that's definitely because, I talked to my kids about drugs, just like now, I'm not saying that it deterred me, but my dad was very explicit about the drugs with me, but what it did do was it kept me away from the white stuff, but that's another story. And so I talked to when my kids were growing up, I talked to them as well. What is different now, and how should a parent approach fentanyl to keep their children alive?
Statistically speaking, if you try drugs in your life, you're probably an adolescent. And that hasn't changed. Your parents, your grandparents, that hasn't changed. But what has changed is our kids now have a drug in the drug supply that we didn't have. And now they have a drug that kills you the first time you use it. There is no, fentanyl, illicit fentanyl doesn't have an odor. It doesn't have a smell. So you might think you're ordering a Percocet or an Adderall or a Xanax, or you might think you're even getting methamphetamine or heroin or cocaine. But the chances of you getting illicit fentanyl are greater and greater and greater. I mean, the pills alone, when DEA tests the pills, 7 out of 10 pills contain at least 2 milligrams of fentanyl. 2 milligrams is a lethal dose. So do the math here for a minute. 7 out of 10 is 70%. You have a greater chance of winning Russian roulette with a 6-cylinder handgun than you do getting a good pill. And that's the big thing parents need to realize, is that when they talk to their children is this is a game changer. This is a drug we've never had. And it's hard for us to understand that because, we didn't deal with this when we were teenagers, when we were experimenting and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But now they do. Now they have a drug that's much, much different, and it unwittingly kills a lot of people. I know so many families I've met, friends who have lost children from first time drug use, casual drug use, experimental drug use. That's what parents need to really understand is this is something that we've never dealt with in the past. This is why so many people are dying. This is why 105,000 people died in the United States last year.
105,000 people.
105,000 from drug. Now, not all from fentanyl, but about 75,000 of those folks from fentanyl. It's about 3/4. And you look at, since I threw that number out there, the government calls those overdoses. Okay, I call them drug poisonings. But if you look, the government's been capturing that data, the U.S. government, since 1968. And if you look at that data from 1968 to the year 2000, we lost just over 200,000 people to a quote unquote overdose. In the last 2 years alone, we've lost 200,000 people to overdoses. In the last 2 years, we lose over 100,000 people a year to a drug overdose. And the big portion of that is because of illicit fentanyl. So parents, not just parents, really anyone who's listening, need to understand that why is 75% of those folks dying from this one drug? And again, it goes back to the fact that only a little bit can kill you, and this little bit has infiltrated our entire drug supply. And to give you, I know I keep on talking, real passionate about
that's fine. No, I'm good. Yeah, that's good.
Think about a sugar packet. A sugar packet is about 1 gram. Okay, just one. I don't have one handy, but one sugar packet's 1 gram. So 1 gram is 1,000 milligrams. So if 2 milligrams is a deadly dose, that one sugar packet has enough to kill 500 people. 500 2 milligram deadly doses in one sugar packet. So 500 times 2 milligrams is 1,000, which is 1 gram, for the math on that.
Yeah.
So I always hold one sugar packet up, especially when I'm talking to kids. And sometimes I pour it into a vial and I pass it around. Now imagine when I sprinkle that into my pill press and I'm making, Xanax or Adderall or Oxys, or I put it in methamphetamine, or I put it in cocaine, or Like I said, if you can find heroin, I put it in heroin. I mean, I can kill 500 people with that one little package. We've never, ever, and I've said this a few times, I apologize for this, but we've never had this problem in the past. This is why it's such a big deal. This is why it's killing so many people.
In what form is it mainly affecting our children? Like, is it those Xanax bars, or how is it affecting, like, getting to our kids the most?
Through the pills, definitely pills the most. The big three are the oxys. They usually have M on one side, and there's a little line on the backside with a 30. The Adderall is a big one, and the Xanax. Those are the top three seized counterfeit pharmaceuticals in the United States. But we see, Percocet, hydrocodone. I mean, you name it. If there's a pill, there's a counterfeit. And if there's a counterfeit, statistically, there's a good chance that there's illicit fentanyl or some type of other garbage, methamphetamine or something else that's harmful to you. It's not the drug that you thought you were ordering. So yeah, I mean, the pills is definitely, and like I said, the cartels, it's pennies for them to make these pills. It really is. It's very, very inexpensive. But you can buy illicit fentanyl in powder form as well. But pills is typically how we see it moved, especially for younger people. Yeah.
That's how it's running into kids.
Oh yeah.
What I noticed, and this was kind of a weird thing that I noticed in the street, is people actually trust their drug dealer, that their drug dealer is actually giving them, hey, it's him. Of course he's giving me, like, they're giving me top of line hydrocodone. And where did your drug dealer get it from? And that's kind of the question that I asked when I had, I had somebody close to me. We were like, well, my drug dealer, they know where they get. No. And I bet you've seen that. I bet you've seen that trust in the drug dealer is something else. If you could tell parents one thing about fentanyl and keeping their kids about it, what is the one thing you would tell them?
I would go back to the part where it only takes a little bit to kill you, that it's infiltrated the entire drug supply. If you're getting pills outside of a legitimate doctor or a legitimate pharmacy, then you are playing with your life, period.
Well, this is the part, every guest that I have, I always give them the last word. So you can go ahead and tell them whatever you want, and the mic is yours.
Yeah, I think I'd reiterate some of the things I said. I mean, this is a drug. Illicit fentanyl is a drug that we've never experienced, especially if you're an older listener. This is a drug that especially our young folks are dealing with, and like I said, it's infiltrated the entire drug supply, and it's scary. It's only a little bit can kill you. It's often unwittingly taken. There's no odor, there's no smell. Only a couple milligrams is a deadly dose, and if you're a parent, or even if you're not a parent, if you're someone that has the ability to talk to folks and spread awareness, then I would encourage you to do so. Arm yourself with good information and spread that awareness. Especially when I talk to kids, I don't tell them to say no to drugs. Do I want them to say no to drugs? Absolutely. Everybody always laughs when I say that.
Hey, it worked for Nancy Reagan. I mean,
exactly, right.
So,
but I tell people, look, just be educated. You're going to make a choice in life one day, and I'd rather you make an informed decision, and I hope it's no. I hope it's no to the drug or whatever that bad decision is. But I think the goal is to give people, especially young people, accurate, truthful information, and let them form their own opinion. Let them make their decisions based on having all the facts in front of them. And unless we have those conversations, they won't do it.
Well, thanks again for coming on. And that's exactly why I had you on. I wanted to bring some awareness about this issue to my local community. I love getting out good information. That's what I do with this show. Can you stick around for a little bit after the show so I could talk to you real quick?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you.